Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. A family man. Chill wind blew down the long asphalt street in Palestine, Texas, picking up sud-like dust and limply turning over dead, dry leaves. The town was tired and quiet. Only a handful of pickups drove leisurely down the street. Jason Lynn, Pennsylvania, sat behind the counter of Americo Bank, shiny shoes propped up in his neighbor's empty chair, white collar unbuttoned, killing floor open on his lap, his head tipped back against the rim of the sleek swivel chair, snoring. He was the kind of man who would go bald early, but not care. The kind of man who'd get a tattoo at 40 to prove he was cool. The kind of man who was actually cool, not because of the tattoo, but because he told good jokes. Pennsylvania owned the Palestine branch of Americo Bank, but did most of the hiring, telling, and counting himself. Cheaper this way, he'd tell Americo's division manager on the phone. "But ain't you a family man?" the manager would say. The manager was a Wichita Falls man who'd grown up taking out the trash for Americo and worked his way up. Most of his underlings liked him. He had a snaggle tooth and uneven sunburns, and went on jogs in the morning in bright orange jumpsuits. "Yeah? But this is how you take care of a family. I got the boys to think of." "Well, okay, son, you take care." "Thanks, bud. Bye." Pennsylvania jerked awake when the clock chimed 8 and smacked his lips. Killing floor slipped off his lap and bounced on the ground, which startled him. He looked over the counter, saw nothing, leaned back, and closed his eyes once more. Outside the bank, on the dry, dusty street, a little banged-up black Toyota parked crooked on the curb. The Toyota sat in the shade cast by the big stone bank, cooling off with little pings and a long sigh. Then the doors unlocked, and 5 teenagers got out. The driver was a tall boy with white hair. The girl in the passenger seat was short and smiley. The 3 others were triplets, all boys with sandy brown hair and identical grins. One of them had a backpack slung over his right shoulder. They looked at each other timidly, almost fearfully, like a group of seamen about to push off from shore and never see home again. One of the triplets said, "You sure you want to do this, Jack?" "Of course, moron. You scared?" The triplet shrugged. Well, Penn's a fun guy. You know he was the one who brought watermelon for the potluck on Thanksgiving?" "Yeah," said his brother. "Where'd he get that?" The 3 brown-haired boys burst into laughter. They knew where he'd gotten it. He'd told them the day before the potluck. Penn was like that. "Shut up," the girl said, shoving one of them off the sidewalk. "Ouch, Callie." "Okay then," Jack said, running a hand through his white hair. "Let's go." The group entered the bank, easing open the glass doors without a whisper. Behind them, dry leaves scraped across the concrete sidewalk noisily, pushed along by the wind, which always seemed to be going nowhere. The five of them spread out, looking dead ahead as they pulled hoodies over their heads and scarves or a parent's bandana to cover their mouth and nose. Jack and his crew edged forward over the burnished granite floor. The triplets exchanged worried, excited glances, eyes crinkled up to betray identical, gleeful smiles. Jack and Callie closed in together, shoulders touching like the ranks of Roman soldiers. Jason, Pennsylvania, dozed behind the counter, the calloused fingers of his left hand barely brushing the spine of his book. Jack whispered to Callie, "Where the hell is he?" "Bank's open, right?" "Duh. Maybe he's on a break or something. He'd have left someone behind if he just took a break." Jack leaned over the counter and jumped back as if bitten by a rattlesnake. "There he is," he hissed. Callie forcibly turned one of the triplets around, unzipped his backpack, and removed a gun. "Whoa," the triplet whispered. "Is that thing real?" "Hell no," Callie said, smirking. "It's just a toy, an airsoft gun. Looks real." "I took the orange thing off the front of it." The boy looked at his two brothers. "Isn't that illegal?" Callie smirked again. "Damn right." They winced and said together, "Stop swearing." She looked like she was about to hit them, thought better of it, and turned around. "Sorry to injure your little church-going ears," she said out the corner of her mouth. Callie walked right up, the three boys behind her, like three toddlers caught stealing cookies, and slammed the fake gun on the counter. "Wake up, old man," she shouted, and lifted the gun so it pointed at the banker. Pennsylvania jerked awake and pushed his glasses back on his nose. He started to stand, but Callie shouted, "Turn around! Hands up! I have a gun!" His jaw dropped, but he did as she said. "Callie?" he asked. "Callie Roberts?" Jack shouted roughly. "Turn the cameras off right now." Pennsylvania shrugged, his hands still up. "I don't keep 'em on." "Open the door," one of the boys said in a thin voice. Callie elbowed him sharply, and he cleared his throat and said more firmly, "Open the door." Penn started at his voice, but turned and walked to the door between the bank lobby and behind the counter. Slowly, he pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. He returned the key to his pocket, hands shaking slightly, as the 5 kids ran past him. Their faces were bright underneath their masks, eyes shining, separating the group and fleeing to various half-open deposit boxes. Jack let out a maniacal giggle as he scooped handfuls of mostly counted change into his hoodie pockets and the backpack. "Why don't you lock these boxes up, old man?" he shouted. Penn shook his head. "I trust you guys," he said simply, hands in pockets. "What?" Callie said after an awkward pause. She and Jack laughed, but the triplets' eyes, barely visible over their bandanas, filled with tears. Their bandanas were bright green and stenciled with their dad's initials. JLP. Jack waved his crew out. Callie kept the gun pointed at Penn's head as they backed out of the bank, faces flushed with success. Just before the doors swung shut, Pennsylvania looked straight at the triplets. Their eyes met. 4 pairs of identical eyes. Penn gave them a short, sad smile. When the black Toyota had disappeared down the cold, empty street, Penn sat down again and called the police. "Hi, Rick. I was just robbed. Can you go after him?" "Yeah, a black Toyota, it looked like. I didn't catch the license, but it's the Hoover's car. Jack Hoover. Yeah, Hoover. Yes, Hoover. Thanks. And, oh, Rick, give him the whole speech, will you? My boys were in that group. No, not a kidnapping. I saw him, though. They know it ain't right. Just make sure they know it. I know they'll do right. I raised them right." "Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate it." Pennsylvania leaned back with a sigh. After a moment, without cleaning up the mess of bills and hanging open deposit doors, he picked up his book again. The Toyota tore down the highway, a trail of dead cottonwood leaves following. Callie drove this time, the needle not dipping below 70, and Jack sat in the back seat. Both grinned hard, masks and hoodies down. "Hey, where's the backpack?" Callie asked as Palestine disappeared behind them, and empty plains surrounded the lonely car. Jack looked around. "I don't know. You don't have it?" Their eyes met in the rearview mirror. "Those 3, she spat. "Those... ooh." Her hands clenched on the steering wheel. "We shouldn't have dropped them off. We should have made them come all the way. They were wimps," she responded. "I thought it was good riddance. And Mac hates kids like them buying from him." Her eyes narrowed down the highway. "Think they got cold feet? I know so. They're probably gonna tell. What do you want to do?" Callie shrugged. "We got some in our pockets, right? That's probably enough. Mac doesn't like change, though. He said 20s or nothing." She sighed. "Well, damn it, Jack. I don't know. I want to go find them and throttle them. We shouldn't have let them come along. It was an adventure for the kids," Callie said desperately. "They wanted to do it, wanted to be the bad boys. Why am I trying to defend them?" Jack snickered. "They took our money," she shrieked. "You know what I think? I bet they're taking it back to their dad." They glared at each other. "I want to commit another crime," Callie said after a minute. "This time, let's commit murder." Jack laughed, then said, "Wait, are you serious?" She nodded. "They put in life for a murder, not for minors." "Yeah, for minors." She shook her head. "It'd be worth it. I want to teach those bastards you don't cross your own teammates." A sleek police car sped far behind them, wind tearing through the open windows, light flashing, horns blaring. The driver sat intent behind the wheel as three brown-headed boys talked quickly over each other in the back seat. The Plunderers' bank robbery and waltzing have a lot in common. Both have defined rhythms, and they're better with a partner. After waiting my turn, like an everyday customer, I handed my note and a paper sack to the blonde girl behind the counter while pulling back my sport coat to show her the butt of my pistol. The note read, "This is a robbery. Remain calm so no one gets hurt. Fill the sack from your drawer. Have a nice day." When she scanned my note, her eyes bulged and flicked from side to side. Her frightened blue peepers filled with disbelief as she stared at me to see if this was a prank. I smiled like a friend. "Please fill it up." With trembling fingers, she stuffed bills into the sack as if she'd win a prize for the fullest bag. The gorilla behind me noticed something wrong. Maybe the sweat-gouging channels through the quivering blonde's rouge tipped him off. He grunted and grabbed me in a bear hug, pinning my arms. My Marine training kicked in, and I stomped the arch of his foot with the sharp leather heel of my polished Oxfords. He winced and loosened his grip. This gave me enough slack to reach behind and twist his balls. He yipped like an injured puppy and let go, slowly sinking to the floor. The bank patrons turned to stare at the commotion. Unsure what was happening, I reached through the teller's wicket and yanked the half-filled sack of money from the blonde's jittery hands. As my assailant rolled on the floor, grabbing his crotch, one of the suits in the back reached for a phone. Time to go. I strolled out of the bank before anyone attempted to jump me. Outside the bank, I wanted to run, but nothing attracts attention more than a man running from a bank with a bag in his hand. The alarm clanged, and I turned towards the bank like the other pedestrians, plastering a puzzled look on my face. A siren wailed in the distance. Sweat beaded my forehead, and I lengthened my strides short of a power walk. When I reached the corner, white exhaust flowed from the red Edsel coupe, and its big V8 growled, ready to whisk me to safety. I jumped in the passenger seat, and Marge drove away at 30 miles per hour. Two police cruisers screamed past us in the other lane. Now, we'd have to ditch this flashy car in case anyone noticed it fleeing the scene. Marge and I have been robbing banks since I got out of the Marines in '53. My posting to Korea separated us for 3 agonizing years, and when I got back to the States, we promised each other we'd never be apart again. Although we talked about it, we never got married. We both felt that a piece of government parchment would not make us love each other any more than we did. When our cash ran low, we'd find a suitable bank in a small town, make an unauthorized withdrawal, and live comfortably on the proceeds for a few months. As long as we didn't take too much or go to the well too often, the local cops forgot us. And the FBI had enough problems with organized crime to worry about a small-town bank robbery. We never hit the same town twice. Our life between jobs was quiet and measured. Spending the winter in Florida, soaking up the sun like other tourists. We danced every Saturday night and fished the local lakes. Marge loved the fall colors, so we spent September in New England before turning south for the winter. I don't remember the name of the town in Minnesota when we ran low on cash. While Marge gassed up the car, I got us a table in the Moosehead Diner. Over the blue plate special of corned beef and hash, I decided I wanted to go fishing. Margie, I've been thinking. It would be a shame to be in northern Minnesota and not go walleye fishing. How about we rent a cabin after this job and go fishing for the weekend? Marge placed her napkin on the table and pursed her lips. Okay, Harry, but all the cabins are probably rented. I reached for her hand. This is the end of the season, and we'll find a cabin somewhere, just for the weekend. Then we'll head for Vermont. She squeezed my hand and ran her thumb over my knuckles. We'll need some bait. I hadn't thought that far ahead. We'll stop at a bait shop and pick up some minnows. Or, if you'd rather, you can watch me fish. She removed her cat's eyeglasses with the fake rhinestones and leaned over the table. Not on your life, Buster. You fish. I fish. And I'll catch bigger fish. Just you watch me. I finished my coffee, left a $10 bill on the table, and wiped the crumbs off my tie. I'm going to the little boy's room, and then to work. As I walked across the street to the Imperial Bank, Marge parked the car around the corner. We took the North Road out of town towards Canada and doubled back south on a series of gravel concession roads. Navigation was Marge's job. When we hit the interstate, we turned east towards New England. The cops must have figured it out, or got lucky. They'd had 10 years to learn out our pattern. When we turned onto the interstate, 2 police cruisers, nose to nose, blocked our path to freedom. Blue and red lights flashed, and cops leaned across the hoods, pointing shotguns at us. 2 more cruisers pulled out of a side road and blocked our retreat. Marge slowed as we approached the roadblock and parked on the shoulder. A cop with a bullhorn yelled, "Get out of the car and lay on the ground." Marge turned off the ignition and gripped the wheel with hands at 10 and 2 while staring out the windshield. "Goodbye, Harry." I wiped a tear from my eye. "Goodbye, Marge." I drew my pistol and shot her through the ear. Blood spattered the windshield and side window as she slumped on the driver's door. I put the pistol in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Murder. Everything happened in a flash. I was just about to go to sleep when I heard the telephone ring. I used a rotary dial phone, which meant that I won't know who's calling me. I walked over to the phone and held it up to my ear. "Hello?" I answered. "Hello. This is the Glasscam Police Department. I am the sheriff of this town. You have been convicted of the murder of a person named Paul Smith, who was killed this night. I have sent a few officers to escort you to the department," the sheriff replied. Excuse me, but I haven't done anything wrong," I replied, stammering. "I was in my home during the evening." "Yeah, right. Tell that to the judge, kid," he said in a sarcastic tone. A knock on the door was heard a few moments later. As I opened the door, a swarm of officers piled into the room, some with guns facing at me. One of them, who I assumed was the chief of police, got a pair of handcuffs and tied them around my wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," said the chief. I tried telling him that I was innocent, but he said the same words that the sheriff said. What a coincidence, I thought to myself, as I was being taken to the back seat of the police car. I don't remember much after that. While I was in the car, I kept arguing that I was innocent, but the officers ignored me. My height and weight were taken after I got to the station, and I was placed in a small cell. It wasn't cozy at all. Just the life essentials were there. A bed, sink, and toilet. I was too weak and tired to stand, so I started to lie on the bed, starting to drift into my sleep. I woke up to the sound of an officer opening my cell. I got up and was put in handcuffs again. He told me I was going to a trial. I had no lawyer, so they just gave me one. From the looks of the lawyer's crinkled and dirty tie, his wild hair, and slightly broken glasses, I could tell I was going to lose in this trial. A few minutes later, a car came, and I was taken into the back seat. What felt like hours later, I was in front of the judge, who would decide my fate. Looking at the spectators, I saw a group of people in tears. I assumed they were the victims' parents. They saw me looking in their direction. They scowled at me and turned their heads in disgust. I couldn't take it. For all my life, I have never made any mistakes, so it would be unreasonable if I was accused of murder. Thinking about this made my head spin. After my testimony and the lawyer's argument with the victim's family's lawyer, it was time for the jury to decide. A few minutes later, the judge said the final statement of the trial. I only remembered a little bit. The accused, James Johnson, proven guilty, with no chance of parole, no chance of bail, can only be released until further evidence is discovered. This mumbo-jumbo is gonna take forever. Let's get to the point. James Johnson will serve a life sentence. Then the gavel was heard. Snug fit? The officers joked when I finished switching my shirt and pants to the ugly, bright orange prison uniforms. Cell number 13 was where I was headed, just when I thought I had the chance to be released. The number 13 blocks the tunnel of hope, I thought to myself in a saddened tone. I wanted to prove everyone wrong, especially my friends family, and the victim's family. But now, that chance was disappearing every second I was in this building. My family came to visit every so often. Mother and my 23-year-old brother came to visit me every day. Father died when I was 12, a few years after my brother was born. Mother always told me that I was going to be proven innocent. Greg, my brother, told me that he will find evidence to get me out. I chuckled. Everyone knows that Greg hated using his brain for education purposes, but this time he had some hope in his eyes, which I never noticed before. Being beaten up by other prisoners took some time being used to. The food there was the worst. I couldn't be somewhere without at least one person watching me. But most of the time, it was the prisoners looking for a fight. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. That day when my family visited, I asked them that I didn't like staying here anymore. Just a little while longer, Mother said with hope. I stared at my brother, wondering what Mother said. Question: good news or bad news? Greg asked. Why? I replied. Just answer the question, he said in an impatient tone. Okay. Calm down, I said. Bad news. I found a lead that might prove you innocent, but I hit a dead end, he said in a sad voice, while lowering his head in shame. But the good news is I broke through the dead end and found some evidence, he exclaimed, his head now up again. I was in shock. Without controlling it, I smiled. It was so goofy that Mother started to laugh, but in a hushed voice. My brother tried holding his laugh in, but he couldn't stop the burst that almost made him fall off his chair. Your court trial will begin tomorrow, he said. For the rest of the day, the thought of leaving this place made my heart feel warm. The day passed by without me even knowing it. Before sleeping, the thought struck me. What if the evidence doesn't work? Or the evidence proves me guilty again? I thought, before drifting to sleep. The next morning, I got up in a hopeful mood. The trial begins in about an hour. I quickly got ready and was taken into the court. I saw Mother, Greg, and the victim's family there. The victim's family was in a sour mood. I guess they were angry because, in their point of view, the murderer of their son was going to testify again, saying that he was innocent after being proven guilty. When Greg's evidence was in the spotlight, I thought that this might actually work. It showed that I was in my house the whole time during the murder. It showed what I did on that device during that time, which was mostly binge-watching a series. After the evidence was shown, the jury made their decision and passed it to the judge. The judge read it out loud. The accused, James Johnson, had previously been proven guilty, had no chance of parole, no chance of bail, and could only be released until further evidence is discovered. But now the evidence has been found. The jury and I have reviewed it. The conclusion was made. The decision is, exclaimed the judge, in a very dramatic and suspenseful moment. James Johnson is innocent. I was happier than ever, but didn't make any goofy grins this time. The victim's family nodded in sorrow and regret for making those rude faces at me. I was taken home, where familiar noises from the house and street filled me up with adrenaline. I walked out of the house and sat on the porch when I saw my family driving their car into the driveway. They hugged me and sat on the porch. We laughed and talked together as if nothing had happened. While enjoying ourselves, I started to ponder, what will I do next? My first case. Aurelia location. My office room, 14/5/2021. So 900 a.m. I was sweating, not due to the heat. I was shivering, not because of the cold. It was all fear, nervousness. I saw myself in the mirror. My chocolatey brown skin glowed. My face seemed like a scared child. A woman in her 30s was standing at my door. Her face was pale, and her eyes were brimming. I felt Jack's presence in my room, so I tried to act normal. He touched my shoulders. "Are you sure you can do this?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I can." But actually, I wasn't confident. I let the woman inside my room. She said, "My husband, Victor, wasn't picking up his phone. I checked his lab, and he was lying over there with blood all around. Please help me." I was noting everything in my diary. I looked up at her face again. "So what's your good name?" She whispered, "Galena." I stared at her. "So, ma'am, is your husband alive, or?" Location: Chem Tech Lab, 14/5/2021, 09:45 a.m. He was there, lying lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. We wore our rubber gloves. The lab was such a mess. Whoever did that was clever enough to leave no clue. Our team examined the body and sent it for post-mortem reports. Jack stared at me. I got closer to him. "I got this note." He had it clutched in his hands. He patted me. "Okay, continue." It wasn't a note. Rather, it was a page from some kid's counting book. There were few numbers circled in it, and most of the words he had written on the page were either blotted due to sweat or soaked in blood. There was something scribbled, and next to it was written in a terrible handwriting, "Feel." That did ring a bell. Jack peeped into the paper. "What is it?" I replied, "I guess it is feel, an archaic word for faithful, or maybe Fe is iron, Al is aluminum." Galena interrupted, "No, it's Felix Allen." I got curious. "Who's that?" She glared outside the window. He's Victor's best friend, colleague, 10 years younger to him. Below that, there was blood, and the only thing I could read in between, that was Nikum. And Veer, Jack asked. Aura, what is Nikum? I took my eyes off the paper. Probably it's a surname. One of my classmates had it. I moved to the surveillance room. Galena followed me. This room is incomplete. There's nothing to check here, lady. Victor hasn't installed the cameras yet. After sealing the area, we met the watchman. Sir, you were supposed to be on duty last night. He nodded his head. Yes, ma'am. I walked closer to him. So what seemed unusual last night? He replied, Nothing of that sort, ma'am. As usual, Victor, Sir, and Felix had a terrible fight. And yes, he was the only one who came here last night. He tried to avoid eye contact with me. Galena came up. Victor and Felix fighting with each other doesn't surprise me. And she went away. Location: my office room, 14/5/2021, 3:00 p.m. I slowly asked, Jack, how was I doing yesterday? He chuckled. Like how beginners do. The post-mortem report arrived. Jack glanced at me. Aura, what does the report say? I responded, nothing unusual. Cause of death is hemorrhage. Time of death is 02:47 a.m. He sat beside me. What did you derive from the bizarre note? I took a sip of my coffee. I've given the note to Elena to find out the order of numbers he circled. Through the past ink detector, Elena entered the room with her usual radiant smile. Here you go, Aura. I and Jack peeped into it. The numbers he circled were 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68. I made funky faces. What is this? Probably this guy went nuts before he died. Jack stared at me. The only one who's going nuts is you. Listen, beginner. See, there are 10 digits. Probably this is a phone number. Unable to control my curiosity, I dialed the number to check. It said, This is Felix. I'm busy. Leave a voice message. I felt so embarrassed, even though it was my first case. Location: Felix's house, 15/5/2021, 8 a.m. I knocked at the door. I was nervous, excited, and don't know what else. The door opened. A man, probably in his 50s, stood there. He wore short floral trousers and a white, crumpled shirt. May I know who's this? I beamed. I'm Aura. Aurelia. Don't you remember me, Uncle? I'm Felix's college friend. He smiled back. Yes, I do. Look, girl, you've grown up. I chuckled. Felix was in his room. And what surprised me was the room consisted of both Akara Nikom and Dylan Ower. I felt like it was turning from an investigation to a reunion party. Felix was too in shock. A positive shock. He hugged me. Oh my God, this day is too good. A few minutes ago, I was telling these guys how upset I am for you weren't here, and he asked me to take a seat. I'll get you something to eat. By the way, Dylan and Akara got married. You know? They're working with us. I reminded myself I had some work over there. I went inside Felix's kitchen. Phil, would you mind if I stay here with you tonight? I need to talk something in private. He beamed. Yeah, sure. He got too excited. Back in his room, I looked all around. Akara said, So how's life going for you? I chuckled. Oh, it's crazy. What about you guys? What are you guys working on? Akara replied, This project is supposed to be confidential. I joined this group just last week, as soon as I got married to Dylan. He is the one who introduced this to me. I owe him a lot. Dylan chuckled. Don't mention it, girl. Everybody in the room had wide smiles. Location: Felix's house. 15/5/2021, 10:00 a.m. The day was almost over. Dylan and Akara had left. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Felix was so happy. I was afraid what I had in stock for him would blow away his sunshine like a smile. But on the other hand, what if he turns out to be a venomous snake? What if he was the culprit? All such thoughts were passing in my mind. He sat close to me. Hey, I too have a lot to talk with you. Where should we start from? I frowned. Why are you whispering? He looked embarrassed. I don't know. And he pulled himself a little bit farther from me. We stared at each other for a second, and then he started. You used to say you wanted to become a detective. Did that happen? I sighed. Coming to that point, I am a detective now, and I'm extremely sorry to tell you that Hector is dead. He chuckled. Come on. Your pranks are seriously outdated. I was gonna say that you've changed, but you're still the same. I showed him my ID. Phil, I'm serious. Your friend died day before yesterday. Tears started to drip from his eyes. Are you serious? I nodded my head. A minute later, I asked him, how frequently did you and Victor fight? He softly said, I need a break. And he went off to the balcony and wandered. He came back. I repeated the question. He sighed. Every time we met, we used to fight a bit. Sometimes for fun, and the other times seriously. But the last time wasn't my fault. He was the one who slashed his knife at me. He pulled his shirt to show his blood-stained bandage on his stomach. When I started bleeding, I left the room shouting at him. I stared at him. So, you mean to say you did nothing when he slashed the knife at you? He went on weeping. I had stopped talking to him for a week, and then that day I went to sort out our issue, and he did this to me. I bit my lips. The watchman heard you guys fighting. He said you were the only one who met him last night. His eyes reflected fear. I don't remember seeing any watchmen over there. He shoved his head into his hands and went on weeping. He slowly rubbed his right hand on his old cut mark on his left wrist. I asked him, I know it hurts a lot, but what was the fight about? He was still rubbing the cut. I don't know. He was hiding something about the project, and I almost did everything in the project, but he never paid me on time. Or maybe he never paid me. I was struck in a terrible financial situation. He went on weeping. I thought maybe this played as a motive to kill him. Location: Chemtech Lab, 16/5/2021, 09:30 a.m. Back at the lab, I met the watchman. Hey, good morning. What else do you know about Felix's and Victor's fight? He waited for a second and said, Well, you know, lady, they fight for the silliest thing in the world to the most serious thing in the world. Felix would frequently threaten to quit the project if he wasn't paid. He never understood that Victor was too in a financial issue. He wasn't able to pay his daughter's fees. I asked, Anything else? He thought for a moment again and said, Few days before they fought, Felix stole the money Victor had for paying Irina's fees. He said it was an emergency. Victor was very upset because they suspended his daughter from school for a month. I nodded my head. So was the fight verbal or physical? He didn't waste a second. Physical? Galina gave me the key to the lab. Hello? I asked her. If you don't mind, shall I ask you something? She nodded her head. I started. What kind of relationship did Felix and Victor have? She shifted her hair falling on her face. Victor used to treat him like his own brother, but suddenly things started to fall apart. I then asked her, What about Dylan and Akara? Galina replied, They're cool. They've joined recently. Victor told that if the project was compatible with these guys, then he would no longer need Felix. I roamed around the lab and started feeling thirsty. So I walked myself to a nearby shop, leaving Jack in the lab. I asked for juice. He passed it to me. So, ma'am, are you the one investigating Viktor Antonov's murder case? I nodded my head. Yes, I am the one. He came near to me. Don't trust the watchman over there, I whispered. Why? He said, Madam, that fool is a booze head. He drinks every night and goes to the backyard of the lab and lies down there. I was like, okay. What? I quietly came back and whispered into Jack's ears. Now I was very confused about what to trust and what not to. I checked the lab for more clues. Galina asked us to join her for lunch. Location: Victor's home, 2021, 11:30 a.m. As Galina was preparing lunch, I roamed around the house. I met his 14-year-old Irina over there. She was in her room, sad. I went to her. "Hey, do you want to paint?" She said, "No." I knew what she was going through. I sat beside her. "I know it's hard." She turned towards me. "I was thrown out of the school. Gradually, Felix stopped taking my tuitions, and now Dad is gone." She wept. I told her, "We'll find out who did that to your dad, and we'll put him in jail." I asked her, "What kind of tutor was Felix?" She blushed. "Who? Felix? He was great. He used to take my math tuitions. I don't know. The last few days when he took my tuitions, his eyes were red, and he was pretty distracted. And in the middle of nowhere, my dad pulled him to his room and smacked him badly. I never knew why. Galina came to the room, pulling Irina, and whispered, "Don't talk about that idiot in our home." There was a strong motive for Felix to murder Victor. He faced a series of depression during his college day, and when he came out of that, he came out violent. I found an unposted letter over there. It was from Victor to Felix. I tried to read it, but due to Galina's presence, I put it into my pocket. Location: Felix's house, 16/5/2021, 3:45 p.m. His father asked me to wait in Felix's room while he had gone somewhere out. I found another letter in his home. This was probably 2 months old. I took both of the letters and read them. It was written in 50% English and 50% Russian. The Russian part was written in English fonts. There was nothing new, while the whole letter said that he was sorry for what he did. There was nothing he could do to help Felix. But the last 2 lines struck me. It said, "Never nikom, mene ochen zal." Don't trust anyone. I'm really sorry. I tried to match it with the note clutched in his hand. It was never Akra Nikom or Dylan Ower, with only half of the spelling visible. But I felt, if he had mentioned it in this note, too, did that mean Victor was gonna take revenge for his murder with that note? But that would be really melodramatic, to write sorry, and all while you die. I looked at the letter even closely for clues. That's when I found out. The scribbling before feel meant ask feel. I smiled. I said to myself, Aura, he probably wanted the finder of his body to ask Felix about something, or maybe he wanted us to question him. I could hear Felix's voice and footsteps. I put the letters in my right pocket and the note in my left pocket. I already had a note, too, where I had arranged those numbers in order. He was still in the same condition. He smiled, but not from his heart. I tried not to waste time. Feel? What are your comments on this note? He slightly glanced at it. That's my phone number. But the commas are crazy. In between them, I sighed. What would it mean with the comas? Suppose you find this number somewhere not related to you. He pulled that note from me and stared at it. He constantly mumbled to himself. After 5 minutes, he said, "If I went by the element's atomic number, 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68, would mean dysprosium, lanthanum, nitrogen, oxygen, tungsten, and erbium." I stared at him. "And if we go by its symbols, then, Di-la-N-O-W-er." His eyes were filled with horror. Jack called me. "Hey, Ora, Achara is murdered. She just died a few minutes ago in my arms and told me." I interrupted. "I know the rest. Just come to Felix's house and give him protection. I'll catch him. We'll find out the why after that. Countdown to death." I stared at the wall with half-lidded eyes and gulped. My breath was hoarse and croaky, my throat dry and absent of hydration. My hands trembled uncontrollably, scrambling for the cheap chalk, even though my eyes never once graced the sight of the white stick. My exhales were never rhythmic, constantly choking on the air as I mentally tried to inhale and exhale at the same time. I looked at every line drawn individually, memorizing what each meant to every detail of the messy scratch. There drawn were tallies, 42 singular ones, 8 full ones, with 2 to spare, to be exact. Each resembled each day I was kept here, in this hell. And they were slowly counting down to the inevitable release. I had 3 more weeks to fully understand my limited time here. My eyes suddenly widened as I let out a scream of terror, a scream that my fellow prisoners were very accustomed to. A scene of trauma washed over my eyes and sent my body crashing down onto the floor in pure fear. A sense of panic overwhelmed me, and my body began to sweat. All my movements henceforth were uncontrollable and predicted by the past. My emotions were painfully drowned by regretful memories that I begged to forget. I could only watch as my gravest mistake haunted me once again. "Paulette!" a gruff voice called, alerting me and distracting me from my duties. Paulette Ann Hadley. That's me. Short blue hair and matching piercing eyes. I'd dream about how they held the essence of the pure sky. But those thoughts were the only fantasies that I used to distract me from the life that I dreaded so much. Then again, I was very far from pure, even before the incident. "Paulette!" they shouted again, after only a few seconds of waiting. Impatient as always, incompetent as always, the voice belonged to my master, the Earl of Daventry, Sir Peter Holmes, a sorrowful old man who spent his seemingly endless days laying in his bed, or sat in his office, scoffing his face with the fatty meals the chefs were forced to cook to fulfill his never-ending stomach. He ate his feelings. I'd feel sorry for him if he weren't such a bastard. "Paulette!" he screeched for the third time, all in the span of 20 seconds, so loud that I saw the family of mice that lived in the corner of the laundry room scurry across the dusty cobblestone floors in fright. I rolled my eyes in frustration and slapped the grungy old rag I used to clean the counter into the rusty steel sink. I tightened my apron and smoothed out the traditional maid's dress, all while cursing to myself in irritation. My uniform was nothing out of the ordinary for a low-classed maid like myself. Black and white, all the way through, of course. A short black dress with a white apron, white stockings, and black buckled shoes. I hurried up the grand staircase of the large Daventry estate, my feet thanking me for gifting them of a different surface to stand on that wasn't rough, uneven stone. Luscious carpet was certainly a lovely change from grubby concrete. Reaching my master's doors was something I was always dreaded because of what lay on the other side. I pressed a hand against the shiny wood, recently dusted and glossed by yours truly. The smooth touch of the spruce was nice against my sore and worn fingertips. "Master," I greeted with a sickly sweet tone, a forced smile painting my features. I could almost feel my left eye twitch in pent-up hatred. "Paulette!" he roared, his voice deep and gravelly. He was laid down on his satin sheets that held many empty plates and cups from the meals I had brought since this morning. They were already piling up. This sight was nothing new to me. This is what I spent my life's work on. This is what drove me insanity. A plate mounted with Victoria sponge cake rested on his rising and falling stomach. Oh, how I wanted to rip it open. "Yes, master?" I repeated, my voice bearing the same bittersweetness as every phrase that escaped my lips directed to my mortifying master. "I don't pay you to lounge around. I have been waiting for hours," he scolded, only to choke on a strawberry that had been layered between the sponge. Bits of red fruit spewed out into the air and dirtied the satin sheets with spit and berry. I cringed at the sight, but tried to contain the look because of the presence of my judgmental master. I enjoyed watching him struggle. "I was just finishing up the washing, master," I responded simply, never giving him the gift of eye contact. "I don't care what you were doing," he snapped with a snarl. "Clean up this mess. I am lying in filth. Hurry up, woman." He turned to his side, without giving a care about the plate that slid off his bloated stomach and smudged jam onto the expensive emerald. "Clean me up too," he ordered, with his own ugly, toothy cringe, showing off grimy yellow teeth. I rolled my shoulders backwards and relaxed my joints in a desperate attempt to contain my rage. I took 3 deep breaths through clenched teeth and slowly walked over to my master, my anger increasing with every step. I piled the empty plates into stacks and balanced them on my forearms to get the task done in one go and get away from my master as soon as possible. My muscles tensed under the weight of so much weight and sent my body to lean forward uncontrollably and my face to squish into the duvet. This would be a simple, clumsy topple to anyone but myself. Due to the superiority complex my master harbored, a deathly scream was sent sounding around the master bedroom. "Paulette, how dare you assault me like this?" He shrieked like a toddler as he pulled away from my body as if I were a parasite. I gulped, my body pulsing with overwhelming fury. My breaths became hollow and uneven, my lungs aching at the lack of oxygen I provided. Sorry, I stuttered, my voice dipping from a forced sweetness to a deep sarcasm. A sore cough followed my words, and a ripple crawled up my spine like a wave of violent anxiety washing over me without placing my eyes upon it. My fingertips grazed the blade of a knife covered in grease. My eyes widened, and all of a sudden, my movements were prioritized over my thoughts. My grip tightened on the kitchen knife, the sharp blade digging into my fingers' flesh and drawing blood. The red liquid sunk into the satin and stained the fabric. But that was no problem, as lots more blood was soon to follow after. I let out a whimper as pain soared through my nerves, but I paid no matter. My only mind's focus was on the man who stared at me in confusion and growing anger. I couldn't care less about his emotions because they soon morphed into ones of pain and shock as I stabbed the tip of the knife into his belly. I pulled my hand off the blade and smeared my blood onto his naked stomach. I subconsciously let out a joyful yelp at the sight of his blood mixing with mine and creating an uncomfortable solution of growing red. I pressed my uninjured hand against the wooden handle of the knife and pushed the blade further into my master's stomach. I hastily pulled out the deadly weapon and plunged it back into his stomach. Blood splattered onto my dress, onto the bed, and onto my face. I repeated this sequence several times, the knife constantly going in and out of the body and splashing blood. With every cut, more blood seeped and deepened the stain on my usually perfectly clean apron. My face was now smeared in the metallic-smelling liquid and was dripping down my chin as if I were slurping soup, but missed my mouth. Master died after just a few stabs due to bleeding out and contagious infection. But that didn't stop my excitement. I sliced as much flesh as I could, covering as much surface area as I could, and slathering it with fresh, pungent blood. I made sure not to leave any area untouched with my bubbling rage. My lips twitched as a laugh escaped my throat, choking on itself and departing in the form of an evil cackle. I doubled down in laughter as pure ecstasy ran through my veins. I bounced on the expensive bed and headed towards the limp head of my master. I swiftly sliced the knife across my master's throat and admired the way sickly liquid swam down his wrinkled neck and ran down his chest like separating rivers. That blood quickly melded with that of his stomach and made a pool that looked like it had originated from the depths of hell itself. I twirled on the bed, never minding my steps that prodded into my master's corpse. The authorities arrived before I had taken my leave, and I was seized before I could flee. I was captured before I could even reminisce my actions. I was taken to Egan Prison and remained there till my death. 3 months, to be exact. It was not a natural death, but a chosen one, confirmed by those who didn't even know me. I let out a gasp as the walls of my cell reappeared around me, and the touch of the cold concrete floor returned to my fingertips. My eyes widened as I took sight of the clean wall in front of me. They were gone. My tallies were gone. I let out a cough and a choke. "Help! Help!" I screamed, throwing myself at the wall and slamming a fist upon it in distress. "They're gone. They're gone. Who did this?" I demanded, punching the wall and watching blood draw my knuckles and splatter onto the gray. "Your day has come, Hadley. You're finally free." A voice mused, their tone echoing throughout my secluded cell. "What?" I gaped, blinking like a confused dog. "Free? Well, free from life, of course." They chuckled maliciously, taunting me with their freedom. I chose not to turn towards the guard that addressed me so rudely. My eyes continuously trained on the blank wall in front of me. I have a few more weeks. I don't want to die." I cried out, tears brimming my eyes and blurring my vision. "Should have thought about that before you killed a man." The guard glared, pulling open the door of my cell and approaching me with handcuffs. I pressed my back against the wall, but there was no escaping death. I was quickly seized and yanked down the hallway, past my fellow death row inmates. I hung my head low, hair shadowing my eyes and creating an eerie effect. My breaths were loud as anxiety built up inside of me. A panic attack approaching at a tremendous speed that I wished to slow down. I stumbled over my footing several times, each one getting more clumsy and emotional. By now, tears were streaming down my cheeks and creating thin lines of cleanliness that contrasted with the dirt and grime that littered my flesh. I did nothing to stop the loud sobs that slipped through my trembling and muttering lips, weeping as dread and hysteria flowed through every pore. We soon reached a standstill where I was forced into a chair. I stared into vicious brown eyes that reflected my own teary ones. They held no sympathy or remorse, just a simple hue of cheek. I inhaled and exhaled harshly, every breath increasing in volume, mass, and sound. Leather-worn straps were tightened over my wrists and ankles, and a rusty metal brace was placed firmly at my temples. Fear soared through my veins like rockets. I pulled and struggled against my restraints that were quickly cutting off my blood flow. I let out screams for mercy, but they went unheard. "Let me go, please. It's not my time. I have weeks. I can't die," I wailed, shaking my head violently in a weak attempt to get rid of the brace that held me so firmly. A loud slap sounded throughout the dimly lit room. My head was thrown to the side, and a pulsing sting was sent flaring at my right cheek. My pleads and sobs ceased. Just a quiet whimper left in its place as a final emotion of sorrow took its toll. "Shut it, woman," a guard hissed. "Paulette Ann Hadley, you are sentenced to death via electrocution for the murder of Sir Peter Holmes on January 16th, 1898. Do you have any last words?" Another guard recited, his tone bearing no sincerity whatsoever. I took a deep breath, lifting my gaze and meeting his to dramatize my following words. A scowl was painted at my lips, and furrowed eyebrows of anger took over my features. He deserved it. I growled with nothing but rage in my voice, a pull at the lever, and a crackle of wiring. Electricity was sent pulsing through my brain and sparked an agony that tore scream after scream from my dry throat. Quickly, my mind was sent spiraling into the endless dark abyss known as death, murder. "Hi, Miranda. I'm officially Officer Zionel, but you can call me Zoe. I just want to ask you a few questions about the recent situation." "Zoe, don't say recent situation. It's stupid when we all know that what you mean is murder of your father. You're a feisty kid, Miranda." "Thanks. I take it as a compliment. Now that we got that out of the way, do you remember exactly where you were at exactly 6:53 p.m. on July 17th? "Gosh, I don't remember. It seems that all of my memories have been wiped from my head." "Miranda!" Okay. I won't be a brat. But you said yourself that I'm feisty, Zoe. I didn't mean it as a compliment, like you took it. Whoa, ho, ho. She's got an attitude, too. I think we'll get along. So, what's the real answer to my question? I was at the bowling alley with my twin Maya and our best friends Sarah and Diavian. We were about to eat pizza before the next game. It was a tournament. When Gima called and said Dad was shot. Long story short, me and Maya left before we could finish the tournament, and our friends lost. That's what Maya said. But who's Gma? Maya mentioned a grandma, but not a Gma. Oh, right. Maya calls our grandma Grandma, but I call her G-Ma. That's what I called her when I was little, and I couldn't say Grandma, and it stuck. All right. How did your grandmother know that your father was hit? She went over to our house to drop off some books that I had left at her house. And that's when she found him. Dead as a doornail, right there on the kitchen floor. You and Maya's stories are matching up, but Maya seemed a lot more emotional about this than you do. She was practically sobbing as she talked to me. Why are you so cool and collected? Zoe, do you seriously not realize that Dad is not Maya and I real Dad? That one left us before we were born. Don't have a clue where he's at. When Mama married Rob, Maya warmed up to him immediately. I was not so cooperative. I've never been close to him. Yeah, he's always been there for me. But he never, and will never, now, become a father to me. When I first found out about it all, I was a little upset. But it only took me a day to be over it. Maya, like you said, is still a wreck. Oh, I understand now. So, the first person your grandmother called was you. Not Maya, or your uncle, or any of your aunts? Not even your mother? Yeah. Now remember that this was Mama's mama. She didn't want to hurt Mama right away. Maya would be too sensitive too, and she didn't have any of Rob's siblings' numbers. So, the first one she called was me. Simple as that. Maya told me that your grandmother called you first because she thought you were closest to Rob. You're a bad liar, Zoe. I know my sister like I know my own mind. She, and everyone else in our family, already knows that I'm not the closest person to Rob. So what did she say? You know, you should be a detective. I did my best lying, and you still got me. That could come handy in a lot of situations if you become a part of the force. Yeah, whatever. What did Maya say? Same thing as you, Miranda. Okay. So, now what? Can I leave? Please. I need to talk to Maya. She's probably hysterical by now. No, you can't. I'm sorry. There are still a few more questions that I have to ask you. Where was your mother when Rob was so awfully killed? She was at work, at the hospital. They were short-staffed. Okay, this may be a dumb question, but do you know where your aunts and uncle were? Yeah, they were all getting together for a dinner at Olive Garden. Rob was going to go with them. I'm guessing that he must have been on his way out when he was shot. Do you know of anyone who had a grudge against Rob? Miranda, who is it?
Sure.
Miranda, was it you?
Diane.
Why, Miranda?
Hasisasa.
Miranda! I hated him. He abused me. He slapped me, punched me, kicked me. He verbally abused me too. He never did it to anyone else. Your sister knows. She's covering up for you. Yes? Was it self-defense? Or did you do it because you were so sick of it all? Self-defense. Despite all of these lies, I promise you that it was just self-defense. He was trying to hurt me again. He was screaming at me. I went into his room and got into the gun safe. I pulled the gun out. I hid it behind my back while I walked downstairs. In the kitchen, he started to slap me and punch me in the gut and face. After a few minutes, I just shot. I couldn't stop it. It is possible for us to prove that, so you wouldn't be put in juvie. For now, though, you'll have to stay here at the station. I'm sorry, Miranda. I can tell you're telling the truth, but I can't release you until we can prove that, now that you've admitted that. I understand. All right, come with me. We're going to go talk to Maya. Miranda! Oh, God. You told her, didn't you? Yes, I did, Maya. I'm sorry. It's okay. I still love you. I love you too. All right, girls. Maya, will you tell me the truth of what you know? Of what actually happened? That's the thing. I don't know anything. All I know is what Miranda told me. She shot Rob because he was trying to hurt her again. Then she came to the bowling alley to play in a tournament. That part of our story was true. Okay. I'm going to call your mother to pick you up, Maya. Miranda, you stay with her until I come back. Okay, all right. Justice. In a whiskey. March 21st, 1957. There is blood on the bed. His stomach ripped open. His left eye mutilated. And the side table is lying near the door frame. His wife is bawling her eyes out, and there is a half-empty bottle of whiskey under the bed. The cut on his body shows that he was attacked by a knife, and the incision is so clean, almost as if the murderer is an anatomy genius. The mouth of the body is gaping open, and his neck has purple splotches. My friend, who is an investigator, clicks photos from all angles. With each flash of the camera, I see a clue unfolding beside me. Officer Barn rushes towards me, his eyes speaking of a strange fear. He clasps my shoulder, urging me to come out of the room. I march out and stand near the doorframe, my eyes speaking instead of my tongue. What's the matter, Barn? I ask him, trying to hide the expression on my face. We need to hurry. This case is a very high profile. He coughs up, interrupting himself. He's not an ordinary person. He is the son of a famous business tycoon. This case is no longer a government record. It's a public scandal. He huffs at the end. I know he is the son of Mr. Edward, owner of the steel factory, but we cannot hurry it up, leaving clues to the rats. I breathe in with ease. We cannot delay it either. Mr. Barnes speaks up. We need to fasten our belts and rush our brains before it goes out into the hands of the media. I nod my head and once again enter the room, observing each minute detail. I see a leaflet in the vase of flowers. I ask my assistant for gloves. I wear them and take the leaflet carefully from the flowers. It's a prescription. The ink is fading away in the water, but the logo on the paper is smudged yet noticeable. Sir, you can hand it over, the forensic officer says, pointing out to a plastic bag in his hands. I take the plastic bag from him and carefully put the leaflet in it. I fold the upper corner of the bag and place it on the left side of my coat pocket. Sir, the evidence belongs in our department. I beg your pardon, but you have to hand it over to us. The forensic officer pleads with his eyes and places out his arm. Even I have a small lab at my home. I would love to personally investigate in my space. I boldly put my statement forward. I wish you could do that, sir. But since the case is high profile, we have to follow all the orders from our seniors and judiciary. I can't help you this time. I would love your cooperation more. I sign in defeat and take the bag from my right side of my coat and place it in his hand. He bows his head in respect and leaves the place. I go into the drawing room where the wife of the victim is present. She has a lilac handkerchief in her hands and is wearing a black dress. Her eyes are red due to the constant crying, and her cheeks are soaked in due to her tears. She's surrounded by her neighbors and friends. I tell them to depart soon, to push my investigation forward. Everybody leaves, and Catherine gathers herself, aligning her back with her body. I sit a few inches apart from her, observing her delicate little hands, which no longer has the burden of the band. Miss Catherine, sorry for your loss. I know the departure of your husband is so unexpected, and I could understand your sorrow. She sobbed a little and quivered her lips. I hope my husband gets justice, sir. That's all I want. I want the culprit dead. Her eyes blazing with anger and deep sorrow. I take her hand in mine and say to her with a coy smile, "That will soon happen. I promise you." I could feel the coldness of the plastic in our hands. A week before, I could not take my eyes away from the bruise, which was on Catherine's left elbow. The wound itself is telling the backstory of its origin. She lifts my chin, directing my eyes towards her. Her hands were cold, and her little finger was swollen. Her eyes were dull, with no light or joy. "You called me here for something?" She questions me with disgrace and disregard. "Yeah, so I am going to dive in for cooking. You know, learning a few basic skills and recipes." I laugh at my lie and take out the tray of knives. "So, what are you starting with?" Her voice is cold like ice, and her eyes tired. She has a small brown patch near her eyelid, hinting at her life. I immediately try to distract myself from the bruise by balling my fists and digging my fingernails into my palms. I think with the stomach, cleaning and cutting will be far easier from here, I say, pointing out to the featherless chicken on the table. "That's interesting. So, what help do you need from me?" Catherine asks me. "Well, I don't know about the cleaning and cutting. Like, see this butler's knives? It's too big for the work. We don't need this, but this." I point out to the medium-sized scalpel with a sharp edge. I think this will do. Precision cut and less mess. She nods her head, and a slow smile rises across her square face. Even I think so. I loved the way she smiled, always. By the way, have you read the 10th chapter of Volume 1 of Anatomy? I ask her, with my eyes focused on the scalpel. 3 weeks earlier. I always flunked chemistry. Thanks to you, otherwise I would be a technician in a hospital. I pass a gentle smile to Catherine. I don't know about the academics' chemistry, but your reaction with women was always volatile. She taunts with me, her gentle smile. Not all, only with one. But that reaction became highly toxic for everybody. Hearing my sharp words, her smile disappeared. I hate for causing an explosion in that research. If I had focused on one chemical, then my life would not have been so volatile. Her voice sounded disapproved. I miss my compound too. I sigh with disbelief. She turns away from her face and wipes her tears. I know it's so tough for her to gather the courage daily and to chalk out the plan. I try to lighten the mood surrounding us. The movie makers are so hypocrites, I shout. What? She turns around, but does not see me in the eye. They always show that when you place the chloroform on someone's face, the person instantly passes out. But it's not true. A person at least requires 15 minutes of continuous exposure for passing out to its fullest. Movies are for entertainment, not for knowledge, we say in unison. Out-timing makes me laugh, and she laughs seeing me laugh. By the way, Catherine, I want to say you an amazing fact. Do you know, whiskey and chloroform have the same taste? She finally sees me in the eye and smiles. Now I know. And laughs like a small hyena. 4 weeks earlier, the church is calm, and the benches are clean. It's Monday, hence the absence of people seems relevant. I smell the candles burning, and could hear the faint sobbing from the room of confession. I walk towards it and open the stall. It was empty, but the nearby stall wasn't. I rotate my head around to see anyone's presence, and finally steps in. Feeling the presence of my space, the sobbing discontinued. It's the result of my sin. If I hadn't cheated the person who loved me the most and did not break his heart, this would have never happened. Her voice breaks down, and through the thin mesh, I could guess her marble hands wiping the tears away from her face. The result, or the outcome of your sin, depends on the Lord itself. It's you and me who have the final decision. I have forgiven you already. But what about the devotion and love you offer him? Is his response appropriate? Does raising hand on your wife courageous? I sigh in dismay. But what are we going to do? Do you think your plan is proper? She questions my intentions. The law won't help us. His hands are long, and their pockets are full with his money. It's not about how I feel. It's about the justice you need. I face her across the mesh, digging my fingernails in my palm. I won't lose you because of somebody's treatment. I choke down my tears. She stands across the mesh, placing her hand on it. I do the same. A month ago, sir, there is a woman. She is stating emergency and needs urgent observation. Will you come soon? The nurse hurried her sentences. Can you call another doctor? I have completed my hours. I pack my suitcase and turn to leave. She says it's matter of life and death, sir. The nurses exclaim. Okay, fine. Only 15 minutes. Then transfer her case to Dr. Edmund. I wipe the sweat on my forehead and put on my white coat. Sometimes the Hippocratic Oath becomes the death of me. I go to the patient's cubicle. I am in no mood to observe the patient. I remove the board placed near the bed and read the symptoms taken by the nurse. Internal bleeding in the cervix, partially choked, bruises on hand and near the eyes, lower lip cut, fracture on the wrist. Miss, when did this happen? And how can we aid you? I reply bluntly. My energy is on brink of exhaustion and pushed to my limits. A pale, cold hand catches my wrist, and a humble voice reaches my ear. Just forgive me, will you? My ears recognize it. And when I see her face, the blood in my body stills. I catch her limp hand and shout, Catherine. Tears were flowing down her eyes, and her face had lost the life and sunshine she had. All she could do was clasp my hand with more force. I kiss her knuckles and run my fingers lightly on the bruises. Seeing her in this state, my mind rattles. I clench my teeth, and tears of anger rush down my cheeks. Who did this to you? I ask her, trying to mask my anger. She gathers herself, and with the last courage within her, utters, My husband, the voice thief. Tom, have you ever been in that situation when you are in a serious emergency, but you can't tell anyone? Well, if you have, you might have a similar story to mine. It all happened last year. I was at McDonald's for my best friend's birthday party when it happened. I was just walking around when a man in a Ronald McDonald costume walked past me. He looked at me and said, "Come here, child." Okay, that was a bit weird, and I was now questioning if this really was a man in a suit. So I kept my distance. That made him mad. I said, "Come here, child." He sneered. By this point, I was freaking out. This man was crazy. I had to warn the others. So that was when I did the only thing I could do. I screamed. That is, I tried to scream. Ronald looked at me and grinned. "Do you want your precious voice back?" he asked. I ran, unable to warn anyone of this monster that was all I could do. And now, 1 year on, I still am. Okay, I know you're wondering, what on earth does that have to do with anything? Well, McDonald's is about to close down, so they're throwing a goodbye party. I'm going to go. I know, my first party in a while. There is but one reason I'm going. My voice. I need my voice back. I would give anything just to hear it again. I'm getting this Ronald McDonald guy back for what he has done. Ronald, my trap has worked. For years I have stolen the voices of children and added them to my collection. Each child has had their life ruined, and they don't have the brains to write a note to warn everyone else. But I have now become bored with my collection, and I decided, why not just capture the kids? I do have an enormous basement to put them in, and who would miss those brats anyway? My plan is simple. Capture all the kids that go to the throwaway party. Tom, the party is on. There are sales everywhere I look. Kids run around like crazy. I try not to get sidetracked by all the sales, but soon find myself in the queue. That's when I saw him, Ronald McDonald. It was time for revenge. Ronald, I can't believe how dumb this kid is. After I took his voice, he still comes to the party. Oh, well, I guess I'm in luck. So far, I have caught 30 kids. I'm going to give this one a jump scare. Tom, wait. Where on earth did that guy go? I sigh. Maybe I might see him again soon. That's when I felt a tap on my back. I turned around, and there he was, Ronald McDonald, his lips a blood-red color. "Come, child," he says. It's all a repeat of the first time we met. I forget revenge and run. And I won't stop this time. Ronald, the kid took the bait. He's running straight into my trap. Now it's time for some fun. Tom, okay. I know you're wondering how I ended up in this trap. But not even I know. I hear a creak as Ronald and McDonald enter the room. He holds my voice in one hand and a knife in the other. "Do you want your precious voice back?" he asked with a grin of pure evil. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I had no voice. That was when Ronald did something horrid. He killed my voice. He stabbed it. My voice screamed, and my throat went numb. My mission had failed. Ronald laughed, a wicked laugh. It was the type of laugh that freezes fire and melts ice. Then it occurred to me. I was going to die. Ronald, this kid has been an interesting type. The type that I like to turn into food. I seized him by the throat and carried him down a long passageway to the food processor. What food would I turn him into? A child nugget. Perfect. What a snack they will be. I'm drooling just thinking about it. Time to drop him in. Tom, I can't believe this. Pure cannibalism. Ronald let go. I fell down through the machine, landing in a pile of breadcrumbs. Before I could relocate, a huge roller ran over the top of me. I was knocked out cold. When I woke, I was in a freezer, marinating. Ronald McDonald sure has a bad recipe, I thought. It was cold. I was surprised I wasn't dead yet. Then, out of nowhere, a claw grabbed me and I still shudder to think about it. It dunked me in grease. The grease was boiling. And that's when I realized I was being deep fried. I could feel life draining from my body. I tried to climb out of the grease, but it was too slippery. I was going to be a snack for Ronald McDonald. By now, I was just a blob of food in the universe. My breathing slowed, and with 5 minutes left, I would be cooked. Every second became a struggle. I was dying. 1 minute left. You can do this, I told myself. 30 seconds left. You can do this, I said, between each gulp of air. 10 seconds. I gave up. The heat swallowed me up the way Ronald McDonald will when I come out of here. The truth was clear. I couldn't do this. Ronald, ding. The door creaked open and slammed down on the floor. Out came my child nuggets. I licked my lips. Tasty. They smell delicious. I lifted one up and took a bite. Crunchy. Soon I have eaten them all. They should be on the menu. Oh well, I guess it's time to go upstairs. You never know who might be up there, just waiting to be taken. The big crime investigators at the Gustav Adolf Lutheran Church in New Sweden, Maine. In 2003, a mass poisoning there sickened more than a dozen congregants, killing one. Credit: Joel Page, Associated Press, by The New York Times, April 7th, 2020. All true crime stories start as crime reporting, often in the daily newspaper. Before the narrative is shaped for your streaming device, earbuds, or bookshelf, the facts are gathered by a journalist. What happened? Where and when? Who is the victim? And do the police know who did it? Any journalist who has covered crime has stories they can't shake. These tales can be harrowing, bizarre, or even, in rare circumstances, oddly inspirational. We asked our journalists to share the ones they still think about, even decades later. Ellen, Barry, Boston, bureau chief. Someone put arsenic in the coffee after a church service in New Sweden, Maine, sickening several congregants and killing one. I was sent up there in 2003 by the Boston Globe to the far reaches of Aroostook County. It was both quaint and horrific. Someone trying to kill their neighbors. Eventually, it emerged that one of the ushers had done it, as revenge for losing a theological battle. As the population in that area drained away, 2 small Lutheran churches were consolidated into one. Identical to outsiders, the 2 churches had what was for them a deeply significant doctrinal difference. In one, the priest faced the congregation when blessing the host. In the other, the priest faced the altar. The poisoner had lost that battle. He ultimately killed himself. It was a grim story about the dilemmas of those stretches of our country that are losing population, having to let go of their particular identity. Have a true crime story to share? Tell us about the crime that haunts your memory. Feb 27, 2020. Linda Richardson, Senior Staff Editor. Travel. Eddie Brown began running in a snake-infested Florida swamp in 1952. In the 44 years after he escaped from a chain gang while serving a robbery sentence, Mr. Brown worked, raised children, and lived quietly in East New York. But he was always shadowed by the gnawing fear that his past would catch up with him. I covered his case as a Metro reporter in 1996. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about the chain gang fugitive, having recently read about the racial horrors of the Jim Crow South in Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. Eddie Brown's past resurfaced after he was in a minor car accident, and the police ran a routine check that showed he was wanted in Florida. He was taken away in handcuffs. Florida initially requested his extradition, and New York law enforcement officials began the proceedings. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention before he was released on $1,000 bail. It was an immensely satisfying moment to see him walk out of the courthouse, finally a free man, as a sea of news photographers with flashing cameras and reporters, more than I've ever seen, awaited him. Dig deeper into the moment. Special offer. Subscribe for $1 a week. Dan Barry, domestic correspondent. When I worked for the Providence Journal many years ago, I often wrote about the mobsters who were very much present in that Rhode Island city. You knew that this was Social Club. This was Baby Shanks's cafe. And this was the place where Old Man, the boss, used to run everything. You also knew that two men connected to a certain restaurant had made a guy named Joe Onions disappear long ago, but had never revealed where they had laid him to rest. Fast forward to 2008. One of the men is dead, and the other is dying. The police pick him up on a nickel and dime charge and ask for the umpteenth time, "Where is Joe Onions buried?" To their shock, he agrees to spill, "I have strong ties still to the state." And when I heard about this case, it sounded like a short story about an old wise guy who decides to go out by doing the right thing. I had to write it. Nicholas, domestic correspondent, investigations. The century-old department store stands 8 stories tall, but looms even larger in the German consciousness. A short walk from the old New York Times bureau, where I worked in West Berlin, the luxurious shopping destination, is a symbol both of Berlin's roaring 20s and the country's post-war economic miracle. So when I learned that there had been a jewelry heist, with the thieves caught on the surveillance camera, lowering themselves into the store on a rope ladder, evading the motion detectors, and making off with millions of dollars worth of jewels. I knew it was a big crime story on the biggest stage. My contacts in the Berlin Police Department told me that the thieves had made just one mistake, leaving behind a glove at the scene with DNA inside. A good story needs a twist, but a great story boasts two. The DNA evidence led not to a single suspect, but a pair, identical twins, identified as 27-year-old Hassan and Abbas O. The German justice system couldn't lock them both up, and each could claim the other did it. So, they walked. It may not have been the perfect crime, but it was a pretty sweet alibi. Alan Reporter. Metro. A Bronx man spent 25 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. Why? Because a witness accidentally took the police to the wrong apartment, one not 16, and the police arrested and prosecuted the man they found there. Fernandez, Houston, Bureau Chief. One night in 2006, a police officer in the Bronx responds to a fight at a White Castle. He rolls up and sees a man with a gun kneeling over another man in the parking lot. He tells the gunman to drop the weapon, but the gunman doesn't respond. The officer opens fire, and the gunman is critically wounded and later dies. The gunman, it turns out, was a fellow officer, an off-duty Bronx policeman who was intoxicated and had just been beaten up by a group of guys at the White Castle. It's the mistaken identity that gets me. You can freeze frame the shooting as the bullets in the air and study it. There are worlds upon worlds of fate, mystery, and human connection at play. These two officers worked at station houses nearly 2 miles apart, and yet here they were, drawn together in a few tense, confusing seconds in a fast food parking lot. As I wrote, in this city, people live their whole lives separated by such short distances and never once cross paths. I don't think the officer was ever prosecuted for the shooting. I think it was ruled a justified shooting. But how does a cop live with a thing like that and move on? Yes, 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 yes. Armando, Deputy Editorial Director, Syndication. Hi. This unsolved case, in which 7 people, including children, were shot point blank during a robbery inside a bowling alley, has been a cloud over a small New Mexico city near the Mexican border for decades. 4 of the victims were killed. A 12-year-old victim, shot in the head, managed to call 911. And no arrests have ever been made. I grew up in the area, and it has been a source of sorrow and local mythology ever since it happened in 1990. In fact, the brutality of this crime over a few $1,000s, the massive law enforcement response, and the fact that no credible witnesses have ever come forward to identify suspects, all we want to hear about a crime that haunts you, a story that shook you, your town or community, and possibly changed lives. We are starting a project that will deeply examine crimes around the United States, the kinds of stories that too often go untold or have largely been forgotten. The crimes can be solved or unsolved, decades in the past or more recent. The crime may have been violent or involved financial or political wrongdoings. It may have implicated law enforcement or corporations. We're particularly interested in stories that may have gotten local coverage or not, but didn't rise to national consciousness. The cheating husband, draping the palu of my sari around my waist. I tucked the loose end of it into the petticoat to avoid getting ketchup and oil stains on it as I helped serve piping hot samosas, ordered fresh from Narula's bakery in Indiranagar, into the Corelle plates. The whiff of the spicy mint chutney I dolloped into each plate made my mouth water. Next, I served vegetable spring rolls, paneer tikkas, and semolina idlis, flavored with mustard seeds and curry leaves, into each plate, adding chicken tikkas into the plates for the 2 non-vegetarians in our group of friends. Said Mira, tasting the cream of mushroom soup from the ladle as she leaned over the stove where the soup had been simmering. Careful, darling, I said, grabbing her palu as it slipped down her shoulder and nearly licked the flames of the stove. You should tuck it in. Mira turned around, facing me as she smoothed her lavender chiffon sari. What do you think? The layered diamond necklace around her slender neck and the diamond studs in her ears shimmered under the bright kitchen lights. The makeup, expensive and excessive, had done its bit in covering the fatigue that comes from working long hours in an HR leadership position at an IT services multinational corporation. But it couldn't camouflage her dissatisfaction with nearly everything in her life, including her husband, who I thought doted on her. You look stunning, I lied. Beautiful sari, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. One thing Raj does well after years of practice, picking up the right gifts for me. You've trained him well. You know, Adi doesn't even know what the various fabrics of saris are, let alone buy a sari for me. There are many other things my husband, Aditya Gulati, does not know, including the surprise I've planned for him tonight, which he should be receiving any minute now. Oh, come on. So what if he can't buy a sari for you? He brings home enough money, she said, winking at me. Well, that's true. And an added incentive for what I was about to do tonight. I'm his only family, and the next in line to inherit his business empire, should any misfortune befall him. I would have preferred to sit on one of the cozy couches in the living room, sipping wine with the rest of our friends, pretending to be interested in the gossip and the conversations. But if I didn't help in the kitchen tonight, as I usually did when our fortnightly get-togethers were held at Mira's place, just like she helped when the parties were held at my place, everyone would notice. And tonight was not a night I would want to be remembered for behaving oddly in any way, however inconsequential. People adhered to patterns and routines unless something was on their mind, and there was absolutely nothing on my mind. Nothing I could talk about anyway. As we carried the plates to the living room to serve the 5 women gazing hungrily towards the kitchen, and I accidentally glimpsed at the wall clock, my heart raced with the knowledge of the unfolding events at 211 Palm Springs. It was 9:02 p.m. He would be breaking into the house right about now, with his expert gloved fingers working the lock on the back door. The light click of the lock would go unnoticed by the 2 adults in the bedroom or in the bathtub, enmeshed in each other's arms, oblivious to everything except the immediate, stark sensations of the flesh. He would then go to one of the rooms and rummage through the drawers and the wardrobe for jewelry and other valuables, and keep at it until Adi, finally alerted by the strange noises coming from the adjacent room, would cover his toned body by a robe or a towel and go to the next room to investigate. My breath caught in my throat as I pictured the long-bladed dagger piercing Adi's torso, quick stab wounds, at least 5 of them. As the victim's wife, I'd receive a detailed post-mortem report, and my contact would receive the full payment only if the work was satisfactory. After finishing off Adi, he would then stifle the woman's impending scream with a hand over her mouth and a dagger in her heart. The spicy tang of the mint chutney flooded my mouth as I pictured blood splattering white walls, the police dubbing the double murder as a burglary gone horribly wrong, and closing the case after being unable to find any trace of the suspect at the crime scene or any other lead, even after months of the investigation. Just as Tanya, our plump, sari-clad friend with diamond-studded stubs for fingers, began waving her pudgy hands in the air and describing the sordid details of a high-profile divorce case her husband was working on, my phone began vibrating in my purse. Not my ordinary phone, but my burner phone, the one I'd bought recently for one specific purpose. My heart plummeted on seeing the name Sheila Sharma flashing on the screen. I'd saved the investigation agency's number by this name to avoid any suspicions at home, even if Adi had stumbled upon the phone by chance. I would have told him it was my new office phone. The subject was seen entering house number 211, Palm Springs, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on March 19th. The subject and the female resident of 211, Palm Springs, were seen on the balcony having drinks at 2:35 p.m. and embracing at 2:49 p.m. Holding hands, they went in towards the bedroom at 2:55 p.m. The subject emerged from the house at 4:45 p.m. and left the house in his car. There were many such reports I'd received in exchange for the total bill amount of rupees, 450,000 I'd shelled out over 3 months. My husband was cheating with a much younger, unmarried woman who worked as a receptionist in his office. He hadn't yet brought up divorce, but I had a feeling it was on his mind, and he was looking for the best opportunity while building up his courage to talk about it. I stepped into the cool air on the balcony and closed the sliding door behind me. "Hello," I answered the phone. "Mrs. Gulati," said a deep, cultured voice at the other end. I immediately recognized him as Mr. Aurora, the managing partner of the agency. But why would he call me himself? It was usually the manager assigned to my case who communicated with me. The protocol was that the secretary would first call me up and set up a meeting with the case manager at my convenient time. At the allotted time, she'd call me again and patch me into the call with the case manager. "Mr. Aurora," I said, "what's the matter? I'm really sorry to be calling you up at this time, and I apologize if this call has caused you any inconvenience." He paused. "I'm afraid I have some bad news." "What?" I blurted out. My mind was spinning. I had made the last payment to the agency a week ago and terminated our contract after receiving all the evidence they had collected over the past 3 months. Everything I needed to set my plan in motion. What could have possibly gone wrong? Mr. Aurora cleared his throat. "There was a mix-up at our end. The file and the evidence we gave you was for another case, not yours. It's a grave mistake, I know, and I personally take full responsibility. We are willing to refund your full amount." My knees buckled under my weight. What did he mean? Was my husband not cheating on me with the pretty receptionist? But even before I had hired the investigation agency, all the signs were there. Adi was returning home late every day, many a time with his clothes smelling like a woman's perfume. He was distracted and extremely possessive of his mobile phone, taking it with him to the toilet as if he needed it to wipe his ass. No, my husband was certainly cheating on me. All the signs were there. "I want the correct file," I said, finally finding my voice. "Of course," said Mr. Aurora, his voice heavy with relief. "I have it here with me. I can have it delivered to your office tomorrow morning. Would that be okay?" In my purse, my other mobile began vibrating. Why was Roy calling me at this hour? I had spoken to him 2 hours ago on my way to Mira's house. He knew I'd be occupied today, and how critical it was for everything to be perfect tonight. One call in one evening could be attributed to work discussions. We worked together, after all. But 2 calls on the night my husband got murdered could arouse suspicion. I groaned inwardly. "Sorry. Did you say you have the file on your desk?" "Yes, I do." "Read it out to me." A pause. "Sorry, Mrs. Gulati. transmitting this information over the phone, my head was exploding with fury, splotches of red blurring my vision. Listen to me, Aurora. You've fucked me by giving me the wrong information. I could sue you for lakhs of rupees. I could have your ass arrested. Read me the information right now, or you'll pay dearly for your mistake. I could hear his mind's machinery whirring over the mobile phone. Aurora, I said in my best intimidating voice. Just a minute, please, he said. Some papers rustled. Your husband indeed is cheating on you, Mrs. Gulati. The address of the woman in question? Yes, I said breathlessly. C401, High Garden, Indiranagar. The woman is... I'll call you back. I snapped the phone shut, holding my head between my hands. Mira. My best friend, Mira. Adi and Mira. I could not believe it. I was going to ask them to bring photographic evidence this time. I wouldn't believe just the report like I did the last time. With trembling hands, I dialed my contact's number. Maybe it was not too late for the couple in 221, Palm Springs, somebody else's cheating husband and his mistress. Maybe the dense Bangalore traffic had delayed my contact. Maybe call waiting. He was talking to somebody else. Fuck. Roy's name flashed on my mobile once again. Hey, is everything okay? I froze on hearing Myra's voice behind me. She had appeared silkily out of nowhere and was now standing less than 3 feet away. I gazed into her brown eyes, trying to find the answers to my questions. Was it really you who was having an affair with my husband? Why did you betray your best friend? All's well. I need to use the washroom, I said, sliding in through the door past her. I went directly into her bedroom and closed the door. 2 or 3 minutes was all I had before she became suspicious. I began rummaging through her jewelry box on the dresser. If she was the woman Adi was having an affair with, she'd be missing a leaf-shaped diamond stud, one of which I'd found between the bed and the mattress while changing the sheets in our guest room. So many earrings and rings and chains in gold and diamond, and the woman was still unhappy. Aha! There it was. A single leaf-shaped diamond stud. Just one. I closed the jewelry box quickly and went to the washroom to splash some water on my face. So it really was true, huh? My husband and my best friend. Unimaginable. I grabbed my burner phone from my purse and dialed my contact once again. Thankfully, this time he picked up on the second ring. Ma'am, he said in his hoarse voice. The work is done. I'm out of there. Everything went according to plan. I sat on the toilet seat and began hyperventilating. Somebody else's cheating husband and his mistress were dead, thanks to me. If I got rid of the burner phone, there still wasn't anything to link me to the murders. In fact, given that I had no idea who the victims were, there was no way the murders could be tied back to me. The investigation agency would keep quiet. I'd make sure of that. I'd pay the contact discreetly, as I'd originally planned. Anyway, he was a professional killer who wouldn't get caught. There was nothing else. Roy's name flashed on my mobile for the third time in the past 10 minutes. Roy was my married colleague, my longtime friend, and now my lover for the past 6 months, ever since I began suspecting that Adi was cheating on me. He'd been such a source of comfort to me, and had become a very special part of my life. Did I love him? I don't know. I certainly missed his ribald jokes and his infectious laughter, the confidence he exuded, and the affection he showered upon me, his sharp intelligence and his precise meticulousness when he wasn't around. Once I'd got rid of Adi, I looked forward to spending more time with Roy. Our first night together would be very special. I was sure of it. "Hello?" I answered. I was greeted by a sputtering sound. "Roy, are you okay?" I asked, alarmed. "I've been..." The rest of the sentence was wiped out by a fit of violent coughing. I stood bolt upright. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "Stabbed. I've been stabbed," he managed to blurt out. "What? Where? Have you called an ambulance?" he said when he stabbed me. "Roy!" I screamed into the phone. When he stabbed me, he said, "Courtesy of Mrs. Golati." My phone slipped through my fingers and clattered to the tiled bathroom floor. My first instinct was to scream, but I simply collapsed on the cold, hard floor. As the sound of the wailing police sirens pierced the night air, I stared bleakly out of the window, contemplating the swiftly approaching karmic retribution, a life of regret. When Raj had stealthily installed the iSpy 200 Vision Plus device on his wife's prescription glasses 2 weeks ago, he had no idea the device would enable him to watch and hear from her perspective, in a way relive her last day alive. It was this morning Raj had received the Blue Dart courier with the pen drive containing the recording of the last day of Mira's life, her first and only day of wearing her glasses with the iSpy installed, just before the horrific car accident in which her car had been hit on the rear by another fast-moving vehicle. The police believed it to be a truck or a bus. Mira's Ford Endeavor had spiraled out of control and plunged into the river beside the road where she had drowned before she could be rescued. When her car had been pulled out, Raj had collected her things, including her glasses, and sent them to the technical facility of the iSpy Corporation in Mumbai, where the team had extracted the audio and video recorded on the device and mailed the file to Raj on a pen drive, along with a hefty check for their services. Taking a deep breath, Raj poured himself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, which also happened to be Mira's favorite wine, for he needed his courage for what he was about to do. 3 large gulps and soothing warmth in his throat equipped him the nerve to plug in the pen drive and click on the folder. dated July 24th, 2021. Wondering what their 16-year-old daughter Hina would think of this blatant breach of his wife's privacy. Raj pressed the play key. The world came into focus with dainty hands, with black painted fingernails, placing the glasses over a nose. The camera panned to the left and focused on the other side of the bed, where a portly man lay sleeping, with his mouth slightly agape. Raj watched the laptop screen, with his heart racing, as Mira leaned closer and kissed his bearded face before wrapping her gown around her body and proceeding towards the bathroom. He paused and watched the affectionate gesture again, frowning. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't remember his wife kissing him in the past 3 months. Not since his near-fatal heart attack. Was there a corner of her heart that still loved him, even though she was cheating on him? Raj shrugged the thought away, and taking another sip of the wine, resumed playing the video. In the bathroom, Mira placed her glasses on the bathroom sink while she proceeded to undress and step into the shower. For a few moments, Raj hated himself for lowering the laptop screen. This wasn't why he was spying on his wife, and somewhere in his heart, he knew he was violating her privacy after she was dead, which made it worse. But then he lifted the screen once again to watch his wife bathing, still as glorious at 43 as she was 20 years ago when they had first met. Raj couldn't credit her genes for her fitness levels, for her 2 sisters were both overweight and looked 10 years older than their age. The credit was all Mira's. She loved swimming in the clubhouse and sweating it out in their backyard with her 10-kilogram kettlebell. With a twang of shame, Raj glanced at the tires of fat around his waist, which made it impossible to see his feet without leaning over. Maybe he deserved a wife who cheated on him. After all, he had completely let go of himself over the past 10 years. A factor, his doctor proclaimed, had contributed to Raj suffering a massive heart attack at 46, despite having no history of heart disease. Mira put on her glasses as she emerged from the bathroom and got dressed in a navy blue suit for her office meeting. Each Monday, she had a meeting with her boss, a man she detested but tolerated because it allowed her to provide for her family. As she combed her long, wavy hair and effortlessly styled them into a chignon, Raj caught his own reflection in the mirror on the chin behind her, a middle-aged, unshaven, unemployed man perched on the edge of the bed, wistfully watching his beautiful and successful wife, who was everything he wasn't. Did he feel resentful towards her? Was it her fault she had done well in her life, while he had simply failed at everything he tried? Was it love that still kept them together? Or was she only with him for the sake of their teenage daughter? "I'm going to be late today," she said, without glancing at her husband. "Today's the last date for the submission of the RFP response, and Kana would expect me to finish it Before I finish my day. How late? He asked desolately. Late, she said firmly, giving him an icy stare. Eat your dinner if I'm not home by 8. I hope you can manage to feed yourself and Hina. It was more of a statement than a question. Raj heaved himself from the bed with much effort. Let me get breakfast started. I'll eat in the office. Anyway, I can't eat anything before my Monday morning meeting. You know that. Through the camera, Raj saw his own sorry figure as Mira grabbed her purse and laptop bag and left the room without another word to him. She paused by their daughter's room, and after a perfunctory knock, opened the door and stepped in, closing the door behind her. Raj remembered sticking his ear to the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. But all he had heard were some muffled noises, as though they were deliberately trying to keep their voices down. It had started 2 months ago, when one night, Raj had woken up to find his wife's side of the bed empty, and loud arguing noises coming from their daughter's room. As he had tiptoed to Hina's room, he heard his wife yelling, "Do you know how old you are? I'm 16. I'm not a child anymore. You're just 16. You're still a child. You cannot do this." "I can and I will," the daughter had argued back. "I forbid you." And on the argument had fired back and forth between mother and daughter until Raj had stepped into the room and both had frozen and then sputtered an apology for waking him up. Docilely, Hina had apologized to her mother, and Mira had embraced her daughter. But Raj had sensed that it was just a temporary ceasefire owing to his heart condition, and the real issue between mother and daughter was not yet resolved. When he had probed about the subject of the argument, both had dilly-dallied without giving him the truth. While he appreciated their concern for his health, Raj wanted to be part of important discussions affecting their daughter and wasn't happy with being left out. Now he watched keenly as Mira stood facing their daughter, Hina, who was still in bed as it was early for school. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mira said warmly. Hina, a scrawny 16-year-old girl with crazy curly hair, mumbled a good morning from under the covers. "I was leaving for office. I wanted to talk to you before I go," said Mira, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hina sat up on the bed, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, Mom. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" Raj's heart swelled with happiness at the concern he heard in his daughter's voice for his health. While not the most affectionate or expressive person in the room, Hina did show her love occasionally through her gestures. Mira sighed deeply. "Your dad's fine. He's recovering, you know. We can't let anything stress him out." Raj thought Hina looked away guiltily at her mother's words. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" Mira pressed on. "Yes, Mom. Have you met him again? Outside classes?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure, Mom." Mira's gaze dropped to the bed cover, and her delicate fingers smoothed out the covers. "I know you went to his house on Friday." Hina's expression was that of a deer caught in the headlights. I went to his house to say goodbye," she stammered. Mira's sigh was deep and audible. "I want to believe you. Really, I do. But I can't. You've broken my trust, Hina." Hina was now almost in tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. But really, I had gone to his house for the last goodbye. I'll never see him again. Except at school, of course, where I can't avoid him." "Good. You know, once your dad is better, we'll do something to fix this problem permanently." Hina's ears perked up at the suggestion. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean, there's more we can do to fix this problem. I don't want to do anything right now because of your dad's precarious health. But once he's better..." At this, Hina threw the covers and jumped out of bed. "You can't punish him, Mom. It was my fault as much as his. Promise me you won't do anything." Mira rose, placing the strap of her laptop bag across her chest. "I'm not promising anything, sweetheart. Let's talk about our options in a few weeks' time. Until then, if you see him again outside class, I'll know right away." Hina stared at the wall clock behind her mother's head. "I won't see him like I promised." Raj's mind galloped to process the new information he had learned about his daughter. She had a boyfriend. Apparently, a boy from her class. Was that the reason for the strife between his wife and his daughter? Or was there more? He wondered, as he fast-forwarded the part of Mira's day where she attended her Monday morning meeting with her boss and worked in the office. Everything about the exchange surprised him because he was the overprotective parent, constantly worrying about every little thing regarding their daughter, while Mira was more of a liberal parent who allowed Hina to experiment and even encouraged mistakes, even though he thought it inadvisable for young people to date before 18. What Hina was going through was completely natural and expected. Why had his wife freaked out so much on finding out about Hina's boyfriend? Resuming the video from the point where Mira got into her Ford Endeavor after leaving office, Raj watched keenly as she checked her freshly applied lipstick in the rearview mirror and used her dainty hands to smooth her hair and tuck some wild strands behind her ear. She turned on the ignition and began driving in a direction opposite to where their home was located. When the police had questioned Raj about where his wife was returning from that fateful day, he had surmised that perhaps she had taken a detour to the market to shop for something for their daughter's upcoming 17th birthday. And maybe she had liked something, but wanted to discuss with her husband before buying the gift. Raj wasn't quite sure what had prevented him from sharing his suspicions with the police that his wife was probably having an affair and was returning from a rendezvous with the other man. It was probably as a token of respect for their 18-year-old marriage and consideration for their daughter that Raj had kept his suspicions to himself. With rapt attention, Raj watched the curve of the river hugging the road and the familiar city roads zipping past the fast-moving vehicle. As he expected, the car moved through the South City Market and towards the residential area next to it. Mira parked the car behind a dented Mahindra XUV 500 parked in the parking space and stepped out with her purse over her shoulder. She rummaged through her purse for something, and apparently not finding it in there, she leaned into the car, opened the glove compartment, and extracted a pepper spray. With the pepper spray ensconced in her purse, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. The pepper spray confused Raj. If she was going to meet her lover, he'd have expected her to be rummaging in her purse for something other than a pepper spray. The heavy brown door was opened by a balding man with horn-rimmed glasses on his nose. Mr. Segal? Hina's physics teacher? Was Mira having an affair with him? She detested the man and had even argued with him over some marks after the first term examination results. Nothing made sense. The man's face deflated on seeing the visitor. Raj thought Segal looked shocked to the point of being afraid on seeing Mira. Surprised? Said Mira. Why? Were you expecting my daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. I know you've been having a romantic relationship with my underage daughter. The man inhaled deeply. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof. Those letters you wrote to her. I found them, and I immediately knew they weren't written by a boy, but by a grown-up man. How could you do this? You're at least 50 years old. You disgust me. The man's nostrils flared with fury. Listen, you can't come to my doorstep and accuse me of something I haven't done. You need to leave, he said, beginning to close the door. Mira's ring-studded hand stopped the door from closing. I am leaving, but not before I warn you to stay away from my daughter. If you try to talk to her outside the class again, I'm going to inform the police. The only reason I haven't already contacted them is that Hina begged me. She begged me to let it go, and... Mira paused. The man was peering from behind the half-closed door with his narrowed eyes. And what? Mira sighed deeply. And nothing. I'm not calling the police right now because of my husband, who is ill. I don't want him to know about this mess. But if you contact my daughter again, I'll have no option but to call the police. Raj's world was spinning around him. So this was what the mother-daughter arguments were about. Now that he realized what had happened, it made perfect sense. Why then had his mind jumped to the conclusion that his wife was cheating on him? And the reason Hina was arguing with her mother was that she had somehow found out about her mother's affair? How could he have been so naive to jump to a disturbing conclusion based on a mere happenstance? The only thing Mira was trying to do was protecting their daughter from the pedophile and protecting her sick husband from the stress of the situation. The sudden onset of guilt at suspecting his innocent wife of cheating on him and violating her privacy made Raj sick in his stomach. Having half a mind to close the laptop screen, Raj continued watching what was probably the last hour of his late wife's life. Soon, she would be on her way back home, and her Ford Endeavor would be hit on the rear by a vehicle that would send her spinning towards the river and to her death. Things seemed to be moving in slow motion as Mira delivered the final threat to the physics teacher, and leaving him with his jaw hanging, reversed her car out of the driveway, turning around towards her home as she drove on the highway next to the river. Raj kept his gaze on her rearview mirror, his heart racing. If he was lucky, he'd be able to view the plate number of the vehicle that had hit his wife's car and hand over the evidence to the police. With his heart in his throat, Raj watched several large vehicles on the highway approaching his wife's car, and some of them overtaking it. Resisting an urge to tightly shut his eyes, Raj continued watching the last few minutes of his wife's life. What must be going on in her mind at the time, he wondered. He regretted not telling his wife how much he loved her and how much he appreciated her supporting the family, especially since he had lost his job. He regretted every harsh word he had said to his wife, every missed opportunity to appreciate her. Each occasion he could have been kinder to her. Thinking of their arguments, and every time he had raised his voice at her, made him run with shame. Was this his punishment for not living a purposeful life? For not living deliberately, but just drifting along the currents of everyday life? Raj sat bolt upright as he saw a vehicle he recognized approach his wife's car from behind. This couldn't be right. Why was the man following her? Raj knew the answer to the question a split second before he saw Segal ram his Mahindra XUV 500 into his wife's car and send her spinning towards the river. Water engulfed the world around him, and he saw the bubbles of air escaping his wife's mouth and nose as the water pressure shattered the windows and rushed into the rapidly sinking car, drowning its only occupant. At some point in time, the glasses drifted away from Mira's face and through the camera. Raj saw his wife's face for the very last time. Some of the guilt that Raj felt for violating his wife's privacy was washed away with the knowledge that he now had the evidence to bring his wife's murderer to justice. Wiping the tears from his eyes, Raj closed the video file and picked up the phone to dial the police. The disappearance of Elizabeth Conway. Elizabeth Conway, reported missing on the 18th of November, 1986. 5'5", slender build, brown hair, and green eyes. Last seen leaving school premises on the 13th of November at roughly 1600, wearing her school uniform, white shirt, navy blazer, tie, and tights, a double-breasted brown overcoat with white buttons, and a black woolly hat. first missing persons report of the victim. No previous criminal record. No records of mental illnesses. No reports of family conflict. No records of conflict at school. So, no reason to run away, thought the inspector, as he meticulously read over her profile, line by line, taking a long drag of his cigarette in between. No suspects, no trails, and no trace of the missing girl. The only lead, a Nikon F3 SLR, with a large crack streaking across its lens. There was nothing special about the camera itself. In any ordinary case, one would suspect nothing of a broken camera under a shedding oak tree, hidden in a pile of leaves. They'd tut and shake their head at the thought of an inconsiderate litterer, leaving a trail of rubbish without a speck of care for the environment. Even to the inspector, it would be meaningless litter, except it was found near the route Elizabeth would take to get home from school. Through the entrance nearest to the duck pond, to feed them the crusts from her sandwiches she refused to eat. Past the fields of goalposts where the local Sunday league teams would train. Through the heavily wooded area where the owls and squirrels nested before reaching the exit next that led to the local pub, where she would find her house on the end of the road. Yet even passing places that would often be swarming with people, witnesses, the girl seemed to have vanished without a trace. Perhaps it was his intuition and expertise that made him question the worth of the camera. Or perhaps it was his desperation to solve the case without a single suspect or lead that made him hold on to a false sense of hope. Whichever it was, he allowed himself the hint of a smile at the result of trusting his judgment, as he swept his eye across the photos that hung across the dark room. The photos of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. The constable stood in disbelief at the first lead in the impossible case. Had it not been for the countless nights of sleep he lost in desperate search of a clue. And now he held on to the clue in his hands as he would his own child. It was heavy. It came with a neck strap, noticeable if she had dropped it. Clearly, it was discarded on purpose. What could the girl have seen that made her throw away such an exquisite bit of kit? He wondered. One by one, the two closely analyzed each scene from the roll of 400 films, searching for the pieces of the puzzle that was hidden within. Seems like we may have our first few suspects. The constable held the print under a blood-crimson tint that dimmed across the dark room. He streaked his hands over the two girls, one who seemed tanned recently from the Mediterranean, with bright blonde hair, throwing a frisbee to the other with silky black hair, who seemed to fix a jealous gaze towards a boy that lay next to Elizabeth on a picnic blanket. Her had grazing his wavy brown hair, The photo had been taken in the same park Elizabeth passed through on the way to school. The inspector's hunch was correct. There had to be a clue within the photos, as few as there may have been on the roll. These three seemed to appear in a lot of these photos, especially this lad here. Suspects, maybe. The inspector spoke with a tone of sarcasm. Or perhaps constable, a concept you may not be familiar with. They are her friends? The constable growled in disapproval, unable to reply with a witty comeback, as he continued to shake his head at the photos. I don't know, Inspector. There's just something quite off about these photos, as if something isn't right in these pictures. Though he rolled his eyes at the constable's intuition, or rather, his lack of, he could not help but agree as he continued to analyze the other photos. Some, like the one the inspector had pointed out, were of her in the park. The location they suspected of her last whereabouts. The photo at the end of the wash line caught his eye more than the others. The photo of the girl walking away into the wooded area. He could not explain the cold shiver that flooded his body. Perhaps it was the faded glow around her, casting an ominous shadow in the dark winter night. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be descending into an abyss of darkness, never to be seen again. Some by the school, seemingly at the start of the day, judging by the children heading towards the building. Some by the front of her house, and a few in various random locations, such as cafes, restaurants, and cinemas. There seemed to be no pattern in the location, other than the fact Elizabeth didn't seem to travel very much, or very far, if these places she deemed worthy of photographing. Or perhaps, the inspector thought, there was a significance to these seemingly mundane locations. Either way, all these locations had previously been searched, revealing no trace of the girl. He noted the appearances of each new face he came across, analyzing body language between characters and secrets hidden behind each expression. He scanned each person in depth, as if he were questioning them in an interrogation. He knew, of course, that the basis of such assumptions would be no different to creating characters for a storybook. The balance of assumption and deduction was a fine line. Perhaps, he thought, there would be someone lurking within these photos, hidden away in the background. Someone with a vengeful eye, waiting to kidnap poor unsuspecting Elizabeth. But he dared not suggest it to the constable, at least not yet. To suspect such a thing would escalate the case to a criminal investigation. From his experience, escalating a missing persons case turned out to have severe consequences for the person who was eventually found, dead or alive. He was somewhat relieved to find no such person lurking in the background. He took a step back and sharply exhaled a cloud of smoke in relief. He tilted his head and gathered his remarks, taking another drag of his cigarette. So far, only two things seemed to correlate with the photos. One being nothing more than a hunch. He could not quite place it, but there was something familiar about many of the views in the photos. Holding a photo in one hand and taking a hit of his cigarette in another. What was this sense of familiarity he felt? It was as if he had stood exactly where the photographer had. "It's strange," mumbled the constable. "Look at it in a certain way, and you could follow the girl's daily routine. Leave home, go to school, walk home through the park, hang out with friends. Seems like she goes through life in a hurry, judging by the blurriness of them all." The inspector grinned at the constable's remark. The quality of photography that went into the pictures was quite rushed and poorly taken. Aside from Elizabeth, the others in the pictures seemed distorted or blurry. Either the girl's skills were in dire need of improvement, or she was too consumed by her own vanity to focus on anything else in the photos. Given that she was in every single photo, the latter was more likely. Except she didn't seem to face the camera in any of the shots. His eyes fixed once again on the girl on her own, walking into the wooded area. "Tell me something," said the inspector, circling his head across the room. "What kind of photos would you take on your camera?" The constable raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the inspector's attempt at small talk. "Nice scenery, friends, family, pets, events, perhaps any special occasions I'd like to remember precisely. So my question is, out of a roll of 400 photos, given the cost of rolls and prints these days, why only take photos of yourself? And why such blurry ones?" The hum of electricity flowed through the dark-room lights, as if the room, too, was anticipating the constable's answer. Could it be, he thought aloud, that the camera may not actually belong to Elizabeth? "I fear so, Constable. Now ask yourself this. The photos are blurry and poorly lit, possibly due to the zoom distorting the camera's focus, and due to the lack of flash used. So why are the photos so poorly captured? And why does everyone in the photos seem to be doing quite mundane activities?" The colors in the constable's face had suddenly bled dry as he deciphered the inspector's epiphany. "You mean to tell me you see it too now, don't you?" the inspected continued, masking the sense of dread he refused to succumb to. "It's not the people in the photos we're after, but the photographer himself." The inspector took the last drag of his cigarette, as if to signal the constable to brace himself for the impact of his next words. "A stalker." He closely narrowed his gaze at the photo at the end of the wash line, memorizing each of the minute details. "These are the photos taken by Elizabeth's stalker. It all adds up. They were taken from a distance, by someone who did not want to be noticed. Except The inspector's voice came to a ghostly whisper. Except when he was. His eyes shifted focus away from the missing girl and onto her shadow, as a look of terror took place of the once coy smile. As if he were watching it unfold on a theater screen, he pictured the girl stopping dead in her tracks as the accidental camera flash illuminated the bushes around her, which were once enveloped by the winter darkness. He pictured the girl gingerly turning her head towards, praying it was only a trick of the light, staring wide-eyed in horror at the silhouette next to the tree. He pictured the man livid at his mistake as he tossed the camera, the evidence, as his expression changed to the smolder of a predator in the wild who had been spotted by his prey, as he pounced forward to begin the desperate chase. The inspector pictured the horror in the girl's face, living out the fear of every woman alone and vulnerable in the dark, fluidly sprinting away from the danger, lungs too strained to scream for help. He pictured the girl pounding her legs on the path, desperate to gain distance, only to be tackled down onto the damp, frosty grass. He pictured her writhing and clawing out to escape the clutches of her attacker, only to be dragged into the pitch-black abyss of the winter evening. The constable darted towards the door, coming to a sudden halt by the inspector's sharp grasp. "Let go!" he demanded. "This is out of your jurisdiction now. This is now an abduction case." But the inspector only strengthened his grip on the constable, refusing to release him. "Do you even know who you are looking for? We have no suspects and no other leads. If you sound the alarm now, we may never get the girl back. That stalker would know we were after him, and who knows what he'd do to the girl. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to lose the girl. It's already been almost a week. If we wait any longer, as you said, who knows what this guy could do? We'll find him. We're so close. It's all in there," the inspector exclaimed, pointing to the photos. "The clues are all in there. I just know it. Somewhere in this puzzle of photos is our suspect." The constable barged the inspector to release himself from his grip. He flicked the light switch on as he began to storm out the door. His hand slammed the handle of the door as he came to a sudden stop. He held his breath and paused. He looked back at the photos hanging from the wash line. Slowly, he approached the image of the school hanging in the middle of the room. The inspector curiously watched the constable, who had his eyes transfixed on the photo he held. One by one, the constable took the photos off the wash lines and began to arrange them in order. The inspector was all but helpless to wonder what was running through the constable's mind. But he dared not utter a word as the constable ordered the photos row by row. The constable's mind raced with thoughts, frantically searching for the thing that would connect the pieces to solve this mystery, searching for a connection that may not even exist. But he had to try, his hands shuffling, sliding and shifting through the mounts and mounts of images. Finally, the constable took a few steps back at the puzzle he had solved, each photo laid in what appeared to be an order of brightness. "They're taken through a specific route," he began. "Take a look at the lighting, the shadows, and the location." The inspector, at a loss from his amazement, traced his eyes along the wash line. He watched the girl emerge from her house at first light, then wander into the school as more daylight emerged. He watched her have lunch with her friends by the cafe near the schools and walk home in the rapidly dimming light of the winter evening. It was all there in the lighting. Based on the path the photographer seems to have taken, I'd say the photos are taken in the same order as some sort of delivery route. The inspector could not help but crack a smile at the constable's genius breakthrough. It was all laid out perfectly. The route seemed to begin somewhere on Elizabeth's road, where her house was, then to her school, taking other routes near the cafes and shopping center, finally ending at the park, where he'd presumably end his shift and watch the girl on her way home. The question is, who exactly would use a route like this? The inspector wondered. Solve the last piece of the puzzle, and we'll have our suspect. The milkman, perhaps? Unlikely, the constable answered. The milkman would be doing his route before anyone was up. A postman? Perhaps. But what would a postman be doing in a park? Surely someone would notice him hiding behind bushes and trees. An ice cream man could hide from his van. Never heard of anyone selling ice cream before school? Paperboy, again, what would he be doing in a park? The inspector dropped his head and clenched his fists in frustration. They were so close to finding their suspect. Both he and the inspector knew they had one chance at finding the suspect before the investigation became public, and before the abductor knew the police were after him. Before it would be too late for the girl. If it wasn't already, he lifted his arm to his mouth to take another drag of his cigarette. He growled in frustration as he realized he had already finished it. He needed another one badly. He needed to focus. He reached into his coat pocket and balanced the nib between his lips. The sweet cherry scent of the Marlboro had immediately begun to work its magic, even before lighting it. He took his lighter from his back pocket, but stopped dead as the flints sparked. His gaze focused on the photos once again. He knew there was something familiar about the views in the photos. He had stood exactly where the photographer had been standing. He had stood in front of the laundrette that stood opposite the cafe, stood by the bus stop near the school, and stood by the same tree in the park, all while taking the last few drags of his cigarettas. before throwing the butt into the bin. "It's the bin man," he exclaimed. Drives around the houses and schools, then goes to the park to pick up the litter. "Of course," exclaimed the constable. "No one would suspect him hiding behind trees and bushes. Anyone would think he was only raking leaves or picking up litter. Anyone would think he was only doing his job." The inspector and constable nodded in unison. Both ran for their coats, darting out the door. They had their suspect, but there was no telling what he could have done to the girl. Both raced to the car and blared the siren, knowing it may have been too late to save the girl from the clutches of her stalker. Praying the worst had not yet succumbed to her